if you look at someone who's entering the workforce right now, when they think of a corporate job, the last thing that they think of is going on ground and getting your hands dirty. Why a corporate job or why not a government job?
In FMCG, if you don't know sales and if you're not there in the front end, and in retail, if I'm not there at the shop floor, that is where the action happens. That is where the sale happens. If you are looking to grow in a corporate life, you need to know what.
Given that you've led such large teams, how have you made yourself more reliable?
You should not, as you grow up, also and start leading teams, do be all the time hovering over and doing micromanagement and managing the people under.
Has there been such an encounter with you where, something that you worked on and you got feedback around it and then you did something differently?
Oh, yeah. There have been quite a few.
If you think of iconic brands in the US, Starbucks would be one of them. The culture, the story, and the people of Starbucks is something that the world talks about and has become a case study for brands worldwide. And today with us, we actually have Sushant Dash, who is the CEO of Starbucks in India, to share some of his learnings here. Thank you so much, Sushant, for being here today. When I started Josh Talks about 10 years ago, I was a person who used to only read fiction. And then I was introduced to the world of nonfiction because everyone said, as an entrepreneur, you need to start reading nonfiction books. And the first book that I actually read was Pour Your Heart Into It. And that's when I fell in love with Starbucks and the culture of Starbucks. So it's amazing because we just completed 10 years and now I'm having this conversation with you, going deep into your journey of leading Starbucks in India. So happy to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me. I still haven't read a non-fiction. I
Oh,
only read
really?
fiction.
Oh, awesome. Okay, I guess then you should start with this one and then go to onward.
I've read this or parts of it because obviously it's part of understanding the brand. But yeah, otherwise I don't read non-fiction.
Nonfiction. Awesome. I think, before we go into your role and what it takes to be the CEO of Starbucks in India, I think what I want to understand is how did this come to be? You are from Orissa, you were born and brought up there. When you were a child, did this question ever come कि, मेरे को बड़े होके एक CEO बनना है या एक corporate में कुछ बड़ा बनना है?
I don't even know when I grew up whether I knew what a CEO was or for that matter was marketing was.
Hmm.
So you're right. I grew up in Orissa. I grew up in actually a very small town. It's a town which is actually the tribal belt of Orissa in the north of Orissa with a population of 1 lakh. I went to school there up to class 10. And then I went to a city, so called, which had a population of 5 lakhs, which is where I did my college from. So, as I keep joking with people, when I went to Ahmedabad to do my MBA or to MICA, I actually had never seen a computer. I had seen a computer on the other side of a railway reservation counter.
Hmm.
And then I landed up, and you needed to do courses and whatever, uh, and learn languages. So, yeah, it's been a journey. So, as I said, I don't think I knew what being a CEO was, or I didn't know what Starbucks was. But I think what does happen when you grow up in a small town, I had extreme confidence in myself. I thought I was the best that could be in everything that I did. That gives you a lot of confidence because you're in a small place. There's not much competition.
That's
Uh,
counterintuitive. I would think the opposite rather, that, being in a
yeah,
small town.
but,
Huh.
when you've spent 16, 17 years being the best, you think you're the
Yeah.
best.
Nice.
I'm joking partly, but that is also a lot of it is true.
Yeah.
It gives you a lot of confidence because you think you can surmount anything in a manner of speaking. And as I said, because you, in a sense, in a small town, you don't have much competition and you have done well, whether it be in
Were you always
extracurricular.
top of the class?
Yes,
Till when?
till long.
Oh, wow.
But as I said, it's not because I was best in a larger context. Maybe if I had been in a city and maybe if we had 100 students, maybe I would not have been a class topper. But because I was a class topper for a long period of time, and we had maybe 15, 20 students in our class, because that's all that ever went to an English medium, and there was only one English medium. So that gave you the confidence.
And how did your parents decide to put you in an English medium? Because that's also rare, right? Most people don't end up being there.
So actually, not really. I think for whatever reason, there are a lot of missionary schools in Orissa, in that part of the world, and a lot of people actually do uh, put their kids in English medium. So yeah, I think my parents thought maybe that was the right thing to do, and I think yeah.
Got it. And when did it sort of hit you that, that this is the journey that you're on, and maybe corporate success is something that you're chasing, or like, this is the environment that you thrive in?
I think when I started doing my graduation is when I got much more exposed to what's out there, and you also need to remember that when I grew up, in terms of, let's say, information or knowledge was also what you read. So it was newspapers and magazines. It was not the digital world where information is that much easier to come by. But I think when I went, and I obviously got exposed to many more different aspects of life, because I went to a hostel after the age of 16, after my ICSE plus two, and graduation is college for us in Orissa. Uh, so I started getting interested in various aspects of. So I knew that I wanted to do a corporate job. I
Hmm.
was clear that one of the things that started interesting me was marketing
Hmm.
and sales, and yeah, that's when I think started forming, I think, an idea that maybe that's where I need to go. I think Micah happened, and that is when I think more of the interest, understanding brands, communication, advertising, running a business, the foundation got formed, and I think that helped to solidify in terms of what I wanted to do. And yeah, and once I started working, I think the one of the things that I always wanted to do was do my best in whatever I did. So I think the rest happened.
Nice. And when you thought of, companies or aspirational brands at that point of view, because that was also your first level of exposure, did you ever think that, Tata or then Starbucks is something that would happen to you, or was it a goal?
So Tata's was a conscious choice. I actually had another offer at the time that I joined Tata's, which was an MNC and much larger in terms of the FMCG world, one of the best known brands. But actually, I chose Tata to the surprise of many people. And it is just one of those things. I thought I was more comfortable with the ethos. I had worked with both of them in terms of during my market research career. That's where I started. I did research in Mark, ORG Mark, which is now Nielsen,
Yeah.
for the first 4.5 years of my career. And when I joined the Tatas, I had also worked for the other company as a researcher and handled business for them. And I somehow felt that Tatas had something about them, which is, a little more softer in terms of a soft skill in term, but uh, I found more empathy with them in terms of, and now I know what it is. It is about the ethics. It is about how we treat people. It's a lot of those things which are as important to me. And I think yeah, that's a choice. So it was a choice. Starbucks was not a choice.
Yeah.
Starbucks happened by serendipity. I keep telling this story to a lot of people. I was actually in the UK. I was based out of London at the time when the Tatas were talking to Starbucks in terms of doing the joint venture, and so there was discussion in terms of putting the business plan together. What is the Indian market like? Consumer, the usual things that you do when you're starting a new business,
Yeah.
and what is the potential and whatever in terms of how we go about the JV. As I joke, time difference between Seattle and Mumbai is obviously huge,
Yeah.
14, 15 hours. So they realize that there's someone who is in a more convenient time
Oh,
zone
wow.
who works from the and who understands maybe the Indian consumer. And because I'd worked for FMCG consumer research by that time for around 14, 15 years. So I was asked to actually help out in terms of putting the strategy together and in terms of the consumer thought process and what we could do in terms of pricing products, stuff like that. So that's how it started. I went to Seattle. I actually did my barista training where you work in a store and stuff like that. So I did that in Seattle. That's when I understood the power of the brand and what it's all about in terms of the culture and the people. But at that time, it was not still my primary job, my day job.
Hmm.
It was more to help out, to put the JV together. So that's how it started. So that's yeah, it was just, I presume, luck. or whatever you call it, that I
Mm.
was there in a time zone
Being in
that
the
was
right
more
time zone at the right
that time,
time.
right, more
Yeah.
convenient. So yeah, that's how it worked.
Awesome. So you mentioned something about, the softer side of Tata. And I think that's something that's even echoed within Starbucks globally, right? Like it's a brand with powerful culture and powerful values. So can you talk a little bit more about that? One is that, what are the sort of Starbucks values and culture? How do they treat people? And how does it come together with a legacy like Tata?
You know, actually, I'll tell you the story, and I think Howard told me this when we were opening the first store, as to, and I think he maybe told it to all the partners. Um, it was as to why they decided to tie up with the Tatas. They were looking at alternatives, and I think uh, there were obviously other options. They had come down. Uh, the fact that when they took Howard to Tata Coffee, they actually did not do a large scale presentation, or they did not take him to the conference room to meet the seniors. They actually took him first to this NGO that Tata Coffee runs
Hmm.
for differently abled kids in terms of giving them skill sets. It's called Swastha. And he said, I immediately connected in terms of the culture and the ethos. So, in many ways, I think the JV was, obviously, each of them brings a lot of strength, and each of them is a huge brand by itself. But at the core of it is the value system, which is, as I said, about the software aspects, is about the people. It's a people first. And in retail, I think that's the most important thing. That's what I've learned much more than, let's say, in FMCG, which is what I've done for most of my life. But when I look at retail, it's about the people. They are your brand.
Hmm.
In FMCG, it could be your advertising, it could be your communication, it could be your product. But in retail, it is about the people. So Starbucks is very, very clear about that. And it's always been about people first. You must have heard we refer to all our employees as partners. And the reason for that is twofold. The reason for that is, one, you don't want any barrier or the servitude in some ways coming in. Everyone is an equal and needs to be treated as an equal. The second is, Starbucks, like the Tatas, were the first for many of the welfares projects that they did in the US, be it in terms of medical. And the reason that they started calling them partners was because when they did the first ESOP,
Hmm.
a lot of the baristas obviously
Also
got,
liquidated.
and
Yeah.
they became equal partners. They became
Hmm.
partners in the company. So it
Hmm.
was not, so it was actually that. So as I said, they have been ahead of the curve in terms of what they wanted to do for the people in terms of the benefits. And the Tatas, as we know, have done it much before it became mandatory, like centuries ahead, in terms of, be it diversity, be it in terms of medical, be it in terms of provident fund, stuff like that. So I think that's where it came together.
But how do you keep all of this intact in a country like India where, hierarchy and sir, ma'am, it's already a culture that's been ingrained for so many years, right? To jump out of it and then try and get someone to feel equal and also work in an equal environment, how has that been?
Uh, You're right. Initially I had my apprehension. Even when we were putting, as I said, I worked initially for that year and a half to launch the brand, and when we did the JV and the business plan. And as you rightly said, in India, uh, unlike, let's say, the US to a large extent, the person who came to work in a Starbucks was not the person who usually would come and pay money and buy a
Yeah.
Starbucks, right? In the US, it's the same person. So there's no barrier. There's no hesitation in terms of, when you come to treat you as an equal or think I'm your equal. But in India, we do have those barriers because of the divide. So to break that divide and to ensure that there was no, and I'm not saying that there is anything wrong in that, but not to in some ways be servile, but
Hmm.
to ensure that you give the best service and be professional and think of yourself as an equal, I think was one of the challenges. And that's part of the training. And I think it's got to do then with the culture. It's got to do with how you walk the talk. So even if I go to a store, in most of the places, if I go on a market visit, of if I, even in my previous job, there would be people who, go out of the way to ensure that I
That
have
you
a
have a,
smooth
yeah.
ride. And
Hmm.
here I'll go and stand on the line the same as anyone else, right? And it's not that anyone will serve me or try to get me my drink faster, or stuff like that, which would normally happen in any other organization, in any other place. So I think you need to do that consistently. It won't happen overnight. You need to break that barrier first, saying that this is your place, you are the boss in a sense, and you run this place, so you need to be comfortable. And I think it's a lot of to do with the training that and learnings that Starbucks has had over 50 years. So which is why I think, and as we have expanded today, we are there not, and someone might say, how do you do this in a country like India? Like you said, you could do it in a Mumbai or a Delhi or a Gurgaon, where maybe people today are exposed and everyone understands. Today we are in 75 towns. We are in the smallest of cities, be it a Guntur, a Bhubaneswar, or a Raipur. But I think we still managed to do that. So I think it's got to do with your training. It's got to do with the larger culture that
Hmm.
you incorporate in an organization. I cannot tell that this is how you need to behave with consumers and then I behave with them differently. That doesn't work.
And what forms a part of this training? Like you mentioned briefly that you had gone to Seattle yourself and then you worked as a barista, right? If you look at someone who's entering the workforce right now, when they think of a corporate job, the last thing that they think of is going on ground and getting your hands dirty. It's a desk job. The association is that why a corporate job or why not a government job? Because, I'm going to get a desk, I'm going to get that power, and then that's pretty much it.
I cannot talk about all industries, but in the two segments that I've worked, one being FMCG and one being retail. In FMCG, if you don't know sales and if you're not there in the front end, and in retail, if I'm not there at the shop floor, that is where the action happens. That is where the sale happens. That is where what everything else in the company does actually sees the day of light, and it's a moment of truth. So if you don't know how that unfolds, what the challenges are, you will never be successful. So you cannot say that I will start at the top. You have to understand, you don't need to do it permanently, and I'm not saying that you need to go through, like in the good old days, every 3 years, 4 years an automatic promotion, but you need to understand as to what makes it work, what the challenges are, because how will you otherwise ever improve it or do better? So if you are looking to grow in a corporate life, you need to know what whatever is the product or the service that you're providing at the front end, what it is all about. If you don't know that, there's no way you will succeed.
Yeah. And when you started this barista training, so you were going in from the point of view that you're going to bring this brand to India. And I mean, there must have been a lot of thoughts, right? You're always comparing, trying to think what will work, what will not work. So, what was that experience like for you, and what did you see?
Initially you are actually not thinking as much about that. Initially it's just the whole experience of, just the learning is so much in terms of trying to understand as to the cultural nuances. Like Starbucks is, while it is about the coffee, it is about the product, it is about the craftsmanship, it is also about the connection. As we keep saying,
Hmm.
people, we are in the people business. You would have heard Howard's famous quote. uh, People come in for the coffee, but they stay back for the connection and the warmth. So the big thing for us is the that connection, that warmth, to say hi, to get your name, to when you hand over the drink, to smile.
Yeah.
I think they're small things but important things. That is what get the consumer back saying, and that's what the third place experience is all about. So, and that's not natural, as you said, more so in a country like India.
Yeah.
So it's part of the training. It's about what you need to do at each point. And then you are, obviously there is an excitement about understanding coffee. Like I said, growing up in India, you drank instant coffee, and you drank instant coffee also intermittently in winter.
Were you a chai person or coffee
Ah,
person
a
before?
cheap tea person,
Tea person, huh?
all through school, college, whatever. For
But you're
for
a convert now, right?
I actually converted before I joined Starbucks, just
Okay,
so that I'm on
fine.
the safe side. It's like, yeah, but yeah, but for majority of your life, you grew up drinking, good karak boiled chai. So that's what all of us have done, and so to just understand the nuances of coffee, the beans, the origin, the roast, what makes Starbucks the best. coffee and why they source the best beans, what is the difference. There's a lot of learning, and then the excitement of making the drinks and serving to the consumer is, and it's a very very tough job because you need to clean, you need to wash, you need to make, you need to sample. So it's not like you have too much time to think, but once you have done that, that's when the thinking kicks in. And yeah, as I said, one of my biggest concerns was this connection, whether you will actually be able to do it as a, on a equal footing.
Got it. So when you were making your early hires for the team, I think human connection is something that you would have looked at too for that, right? So what were some of the skills that you were looking for when you were building that initial core team that would work for you here? And how has that changed over a period of time?
So as I said, it was not that I worked too much at that point of time. We opened the store, the first store, I remember, on 19th of October 2012. I moved back to my Tata consumer role in April. Uh, Once we had opened, I think, Mumbai and Delhi.
Yeah.
Uh, so it was not like we did too much of hiring. But one of the things that we were clear about is, and I think I've always believed in that, not just here, but in general in terms of hiring. Hiring is a 50-50. You get it irrespective of how much testing you do, psychometric, whatever, and how many ever rounds of interview you do. At the end of the day, you cannot judge a person in the 1.5, 2 hours, whatever time you spend. So there's a 50-50. You
Hmm.
will succeed some, you will fail some. I think that's the first acceptance. But I think what is more important is to know the person. I think if the person has the right value system, if the person is a good person intrinsically, uh, I think the rest will fall in place. So that's what you look for when you're hiring. At least that's what I believe in. And in this case, you wanted someone who has a pleasing personality because
Hmm.
mainly for our baristas, people that we're recruiting for the stores, because that is where the connection comes in. So you needed someone with that pleasing personality, someone with patience. It's not easy. You would have a bad day at home for with your husband or her wife, or your kids not well, but you still need to come and for 8 hours smile, and many of us are not the best customers. We will have our own quirks, and we will, but still to smile, to be nice, I think requires a lot of patience. So
Let's now go a little deep into talking about the role of a CEO, right? I think across different industries, different product lines, it varies a lot. And there are also certain, conceptions that people have looking at what a CEO should be or how they should be. For example, you mentioned the fancy dress with wearing a coat, etc. And I think one of the things that people talk a lot about is, what is the executive presence of a CEO, and how do they sort of command a room and everything. So, like, coming into this, when you decided to not look that sort of archetype, how did you differentiate yourself from the rest, and what do you really think it takes to be or command that presence?
so so let me clarify again, but the fancy dress was a joke. I don't
Yeah.
want to offend people.
Yeah.
But I think the to command presence, you need to be confident in yourself, right? You need to be well prepared. You need to know what you're going into a meeting or what you're doing, right? And I think the more important part, and that I think is the most important part, is to be your authentic self. I think that is where the presence comes from. You need to be yourself. If someone is hired, and so someone might be comfortable in a suit, that's their authentic self. They like to, dress that way. Someone might be comfortable in a t-shirt. And I think one of the things we also need to do is we hire people because we want them to be different, bring unique skill sets, and then we want everyone to conform. We want everyone to wear similar clothes. If not, thankfully we don't do uniforms
Yeah,
anymore.
thank God. Yeah.
Yeah, but there are still, this thought process as to how someone should dress in corporate, how someone can dress in advertising, how someone can dress, in a startup.
Yeah.
We are then putting pressure. You're not allowing the person to be his or her authentic self, and that defeats the whole purpose. So I think presence comes from confidence and being your authentic self. Short answer.
And one of the things that people talk about or can't actually move away from in their early career is taking negative feedback, especially from your managers. Firstly, seeking that feedback, and second is being able to absorb that feedback and actually improve themselves. Has there been such an encounter with you where there's something that you worked on and you got feedback around it, and then you did something differently?
Oh yeah, there have been quite a few, uh, but
What was the harshest?
I think three of them actually on my day one when I joined work. I was asked to do a proposal, which was supposed to go to a client at 5 o'clock. Okay, and this was in my research days. And the system then, and this was in, I started working in Mumbai, and the system was that you had a office boy who used to take it. You didn't have courier and be
Yeah.
fast and stuff like that, so there was an office boy who used to go and do take the
Physically.
physical proposal,
Hmm.
because you didn't send it on email at 5 o'clock, so there was a cutoff. You would leave
Hmm.
the office at 5. I was late.
Hmm.
I finished the proposal at 5:10, and I remember my boss telling me that this needs to go to the client. You need to go and deliver it. And I didn't know anything about Bombay. It was like my day 3 or day 4, and I had to take a bus, go drop it at the client's office. So that taught me the value of time. That also taught me that if I have given a commitment, there are a lot of other moving pieces, and you need to uh, ensure. I don't think I've been late to a meeting after that. But that's a harsh lesson, to figure out how to take a bus in Mumbai.
How
And
old were you back then?
I was
This was your
first job
first
was
job, right?
23.
Hmm. Wow.
But just the sheer size of the
Yeah,
city
yeah, no,
can
absolutely. Consume you.
consume
Hmm.
you. So like I didn't even know the roads and name of the roads, but yeah, I did find my way through and I did deliver. So that I think was one lesson. I remember the other one was one of those days, and this was a proposal again. This was not a proposal. This was actually a report that we were doing, and I used to work on it. It used to be called Campus Track,
Hmm.
where we used to rank all the institutes, which was something that Nielsen did at that point of time. Campus Track, all the management institutes and stuff like that. And it was a subscribed thing, so people paid for it. I had done the report, and I think and that's when I learned that you need to be passionate. I had not paid as much attention,
Hmm.
and I think there were quite a few errors in terms of English, grammar, and stuff like that. And my boss at that time had marked all of it in red, and she told me that if you want to work here, I don't want to see this next time. And if this happens again, then you might as well find yourself another job. Uh, so yeah, you then realize that you need to pay more attention to things, mainly which is going outside. Someone has paid money for it,
Yeah.
and that's what she told me. She said it's not an internal document that you. It's someone who has paid money, and we need to ensure that there are no errors. So I think that taught you the value of your service, and the fact that you owe it to someone who trusted you and believed in you and has paid you money for what you're giving. So you cannot just take it for granted. The last I think was not very far uh, back. It was maybe 4 5 years. I had gone for one of these executive leadership courses, and you do this
You did
360 degree.
was it the Stanford or Harvard
It
one?
was one of
Huh.
those, and
Okay.
and
Hmm.
uh, part of it is a 360 degree and feedback. And I think one of the important things is the feedback that I got, and I thought I was, I hear, but I don't listen. The fact is that I am impatient with people, and in many a times when someone is starting to speak to me, I have already raced ahead and started thinking of my reply or the solution, or and hence I'm no more listening.
Yeah.
I'm hearing what you're saying, but I've already started thinking of, अच्छा इसको अभी क्या बोलने का, इसका आंसर क्या हो सकता है, इसका solution क्या हो सकता है. And that's what a lot of us do. And then it actually hit me after so many years of working. That's so true, because many a times people are not come to you to actually ask for a solution. They just want you to listen to them. It's about empathy, and many a times we don't do it as leaders. And I think that was an important lesson. So yeah, quite a few of them.
Are you there? Are you around? Are you going to step in to solve a problem or a crisis? And given that you've led such large teams, how have you made yourself more reliable? Someone who people can approach, talk to.
Right. As I mentioned earlier, I think one of the things to in some ways. Okay, first let me answer the question on reliability. And in some ways, I think it's a fine balancing act, and I'll tell you why I think it's a fine balancing act, and something that again uh, you learn over a period of time. But I think something that anyone who's aspiring to be a leader needs to be aware of, according to me, is you should not, as you grow up, also and start leading teams, do be all the time hovering over and doing micromanagement and managing the people under you. And this is one of the things that I've seen and learned is you got promoted because you did your previous job best. So that is what you know best. Even as you grow and you recruit someone in your place, you still want to go back and do that job because you think that you are the best at that job. But so you first and foremost need to step out and let the new person do the job, right? And not interfere and give you ideas because you've recruited someone hoping that that person will add value and do different things. I know it's tough, it's not easy because, as I said, you have got promoted because you did that job very well, in a manner of speaking, right? So you want to show your skill sets or show off. I know this, but you need to restrain yourself. So when it comes to and why I make this point, it's so it shouldn't be that you're stepping in at every. Yeah, you need to give distance. People will learn from their mistakes, and you need to give them that opportunity. You also don't want them to do what you were doing. So it's not like you can share your learnings over a period of time, but it is also not about telling them that I know this will work. Okay, and hence don't try anything new. That is actually when risk taking reduces, because then everyone is doing what you did. There's no new thinking. So so that's actually, to me, that is the tougher part of not interfering, not letting go, of letting go and not micromanaging. So I think when we talk about reliability or when we talk about empathy, we should be clear that this is not what you want to do. So what you need to do is that people should have the confidence to do what they need to do, to even take the risk that they need to do, knowing that you will back them up if there are mistakes. And obviously there is also a fine line between how much risk you should take and when you should not take a risk, because you're also responsible for people who have invested. And it is, you have returns to give, be it to the stock market, be it to your investors, be it to your board. So it is also important. So you only step in when you think that things could go very wrong, and or you give that much of authority, or people should trust you enough to know when to come to you. I think that's the most important thing, and they know that when they come to you, they can have a discussion which is productive, and there is a right path that will come out of it. So you should be available, but you should not be available where you are interfering with work. And they need to have the comfort that even if there is a mistake or even if there is a failure, you would be there to be on their side and back them up on that. And I think so that's been my motto. So the best way to do that is to be yourself and be authentic.
Awesome. You've spoken a lot about different soft skills that are required for the role, right? And as you grow in your corporate journey, these are essential, whether it's things like being reliable, available, accessible, empathetic, communicative, just a people's person. But as someone who's in their middle management journey right now and has aspirations that within the next 7 to 10 years, things are changing around us really fast now. So, even in terms of some technical skills or hard skills, what are some of the things that you've had to learn to take up this role? Or what would you advise people to learn now, given how rapidly things are changing?
See, one is obviously you need to be good at a functional level. I'm talking a lot about soft skills, and because when you come to a leadership role, then it is about people. It is about managing people, it is about motivating people, it is about leading people. But coming to that, you need to be good at what you do. Yeah, if you don't know functionally or from a business point of view what is required, you won't get anywhere. So that's the basic. So someone who is at middle management, let's say today, let's say heading a function or one level below heading a function, should have a skill set which a should be clear about all the functional aspects of the function he or she is working in. If it's finance, all aspects of finance. If it is in marketing, all aspects of marketing. But I think at middle management, it is also when you start moving away from just your functional skills and looking at it from a more holistic business point of view as to what drives business, who is my consumer, what is, as I said, where is the moment of truth. Every business has a moment of truth, right? Be it at consumption, be it at the selling point, be it at, so what are those moments? What is it that I can do and contribute to make that better? Because that is where the money will come, if, right? So that understanding and is what you need, which is a skill that you need to develop. That comes with being at that moment a lot of times, seeing it for yourself, working on it. And I think that's what you need to start doing and start looking at developing the horizon of your skill set. So if you're a marketing person, try to understand the commercial aspects of it, because just being creative or communicating well or selling will not make the business grow. You also need to make money. You also need to understand what drives the P&L. So to get that broader perspective or to understand supply chain, you'd hear this very often in FMCG, right? You marketing guys will come up with crazy ideas, new products, innovations. The supply chain is then running helter skelter to, where will I produce this? How will I produce this? Will I produce it at the cost that you want so that the consumer will buy it? So that appreciation of the challenges, you don't need to be an expert, let's say in operations or supply chain or finance, but you need to understand what is important and start asking those questions. So I think that middle management to senior management, that is the skill set that you need to start developing to get a wider, you should no more be focused into your functional thing. You need to have that width of experience. And I think that's also the time when you need to know how to lead teams, the team dynamics, because that is when you will start handling bigger and larger teams. So I think that's what is important.
Got it. For someone who's at this stage in their career, who is looking at growing the ranks, again, there's always this question of whether I should stay in a particular industry or switch. Sometimes when you're in a place where you're getting a better opportunity, but it requires an industry switch, and then you're left uncomfortable because you don't know how you would perform there. Something similar happened to you when you sort of made the switch between FMCG and retail. So how did you think that through for yourself? And how should someone else do it as well?
Yeah. So you're right. I have actually changed industry thrice. I started in a service industry,
Yeah.
in research, and then moved into FMCG, and then moved into retail. But even in FMCG, where I spent a large part of my career, I have tried to do different roles, or handle different categories or different regions, or and the reason for that is I think that's how the learning happens. As long as you, so when you're changing industry, in fact I would encourage people to do that from a learning perspective, to look at different options. As I said, the width of the role is as important, and as you look at new categories, or if you get that within the same, and Tata's being large, it helps you to get that exposure otherwise. But the more exposure you have at some levels, the better it is, because you're seeing different aspects of the business. But also, when you step back, to answer your question, in terms of, at least for me, I think some of the fundamentals remain the same. To run any business, it's actually not that complicated. You need to understand what is it that you're fulfilling from a consumer point of view, and to fulfill that requirement, what product or service you can do, and how you can do it at the least cost so that you can sell it at a profit, right?
You make this seem very easy.
But that's all that is there to it.
Yeah.
We can
Hmm.
complicate it to whatever extent we want, but that's what you need to do, right? It is easy to say, but you need to figure out how to understand that consumer, understand what is the unfulfilled requirement or where is the opportunity, and all of that we know. But so that remains constant across any industry, any, be it FMCG, be it retail. So the fundamentals don't change. So as long as you're clear, the other intricacies of the industry you will learn. If you're good, and if you, as I said, if you're interested, if you're passionate, it won't happen overnight. You need to give yourself the 3 to 6 months to understand a new category, a new industry. And I think that's the other thing I keep advising a lot of people who come in new. When you come in new, the general tendency, or when you switch, is to prove and to bring all your learnings and immediately start making changes because you want to prove yourself. My strong recommendation suggestion is, first understand what the new environment is like, what is this new category, and obviously you have joined because it's a great place. So I'm hoping that they have done well for themselves, and they wouldn't have done well if they didn't know. And they have obviously done well because they know what they're doing. So first try to understand what is it that they're doing well before you start thinking about contributing. I know it's difficult to sometimes have that patience, but I think you will be much better off, and it's much easier then to get the team on your side. So yeah.
And what do you think is a good tenure for someone in a company, especially now when if you look at like people who are entering the workforce at 19, 20, for them 1 year is very long, right? Like the need to switch, the need to grow, the curiosity is at an all-time peak. So if in 3 months you're not satisfied, you're jumping, but that doesn't always end up looking good on your resume, so you have a tough time later. But what is a good tenure in an organization?
I'm the wrong person to ask this question. I've been in one organization for 24 years. Every time I go and meet my classmates, people laugh at me. The average of a batch is, I think, 7 or 8 jobs. I'm in my second job or third job, if you consider this as a separate.
Is that a common trait amongst people who actually become CEOs?
I actually have never thought about it or looked at it, and but I actually I've seen that most of them would have done a significant stint at some point of time, where, and that would generally be where they have made their mark.
Hmm.
Okay, I don't know of too many people who have worked for 2 or 3 years and made a big mark. Yeah, uh, across board, be it, you know it does take 4 or 5 years to contribute and make a significant mark. So if you're someone who gets bored easily, and if you cannot change jobs within the organization you're working, maybe that's the tenure.
Hmm.
I think give it 3 to 4 years to make a mark, because it's one thing to say that you manage something or did a job, but if you want to contribute and move things from point A to point B, then you need time for that to have taken place and for you to have seen and got that satisfaction. I think that's important.
Sum it all up, I think we've discussed various different facets of your journey and what people can take away from it. But if you were to look back um, and look back attentively, what are some of the things that you would do differently? And don't say nothing. I have lived an ideal life. I have reached where I wanted to. But anything you do more of, less of.
I actually don't know. But that's something I've never, frankly, thought about. Um, but as I said, maybe I would be more empathetic and more patient with people I've worked. I've realized over a period of time that maybe that's important. And uh, everyone is different, and everyone has their own speed at which they do things and and deliver. So sometimes it is important to be a bit more patient and uh, understand where the other person is coming from. Maybe that's something I would do.
Got
a
it.
little better.
No, thank you so much for this. I think our idea behind these conversations is to do a crash course in becoming a leader or a CEO. So there are enough facets that you've covered. And thanks for this entire conversation.
I love the conversation. I hope people get something out of it and don't get more confused.
No, absolutely not. Thank you.
Thank you.